It was a bright, eerie night on the edge of the galaxy. A fleet of alien warships hovered above a distant human colony. The ships, sleek and silent, shimmered with advanced technology, their hulls reflecting the distant stars. The aliens on board, with their cold, emotionless faces, were ready for their mission. They had come to destroy a dangerous creature, a beast that had been terrorizing the locals. What they didn't know was that this dangerous creature was not what it seemed, and it wasn't a threat at all. It was a pet. The alien commander, Zorath, stood at the front of the command deck. His species, the Zethra, were known throughout the galaxy for their unmatched military strength and ruthlessness. No one dared challenge them. But this mission was different. They had received troubling reports from a nearby research outpost. The creature was large, vicious, and able to overpower even the most advanced alien weapons. The Zethra were used to dealing with such creatures, but they had no idea they were about to make a deadly mistake. Zorath's eyes narrowed as he studied the maps and data on his console. "Prepare the hunters," he ordered. "We move in 20 minutes." On the surface of the planet below, the human, Captain Aaron Blake, had just received the worst news of his life. The creature, the one he had raised from a tiny, helpless cub, was under threat. A group of alien soldiers had landed on the planet's surface, their scanners detecting the creature. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know that the beast they were hunting was actually his pet, a genetically enhanced animal that he had saved and nurtured over the years. Blake was not just a soldier. He was also a protector, and the creature, which he had named Brutus, was his best friend. Brutus wasn't just any wild animal. He had been bred to protect, to fight, and to obey Blake's commands. Their bond was unbreakable. As Blake stood by the communication panel in his small, dimly lit cabin, his thoughts raced. He knew the aliens would never understand. To them, Brutus was a threat, a monster that needed to be eradicated. But to Blake, Brutus was family. He had raised the creature from a young age, feeding him, teaching him, and forming a bond that no alien could comprehend. "Sir, we've detected their landing zone," said one of Blake's officers, snapping him out of his thoughts. "The Zethra are already on the move." Blake's heart pounded in his chest. There was no time to waste. He quickly suited up, grabbing his weapons and heading for the exit. He needed to reach Brutus before the aliens did. Meanwhile, the Zethra hunters moved quickly through the dense jungle, their advanced cloaking technology making them nearly invisible to the naked eye. They were experts in tracking and eliminating threats. Their weapons were powerful, capable of reducing any creature to ashes within seconds. But they didn't know they were hunting something more than just a wild animal. They were hunting Blake's friend. Through the thick forest, the aliens moved silently. Zorath gave the order to scan for the creature, and their sophisticated technology soon picked up the target. It was massive, too big to be anything ordinary. The scanners registered an unusual energy signature around the creature, which made it even more dangerous in their eyes. "There it is," one of the hunters muttered, aiming his weapon at the coordinates. As they closed in on Brutus's location, the human captain wasn't far behind. He was running through the trees, desperate to reach his pet before the aliens did. His mind raced with thoughts of how he would explain this to the Zethra. They wouldn't listen, of course. They never did. He needed to act fast. Suddenly there was a roar, loud and terrifying. Brutus was close. The alien hunters paused for a moment, their weapons raised, ready to strike. They had found their target. Through the bushes, Brutus emerged, a massive, towering creature with glowing blue eyes and scales that shimmered in the moonlight. His sharp teeth and claws gleamed as he snarled, sensing the threat nearby. The Zethra soldiers raised their weapons, aiming for the creature's heart. But then, just as Blake broke through the trees, shouting at them to stop, the alien hunters fired. The blast was immediate and devastating. Brutus let out a final, powerful roar before collapsing to the ground. The impact of the energy blast was too much. Blake screamed in horror as he rushed toward his fallen friend, but the aliens only stood, watching coldly. "What have you done?" Blake shouted, his voice filled with disbelief and grief. He fell to his knees beside Brutus's body, his hands trembling as he checked for signs of life. But it was too late. The creature that had been his companion, his protector, was gone. Zorath and his soldiers stood still, their expressions unreadable. They had completed their mission, but they had no idea the full weight of their actions. They had killed a pet, not just a creature. To them, it was just another alien life form to eliminate. But to Blake, it was a betrayal that he would never forget. As Blake knelt by his pet, tears in his eyes, the Zethra officer scanned the body. His eyes widened as he noticed something unusual, something he didn't expect. Embedded in the creature's collar was a human-made device, a tracking beacon. The creature wasn't just a wild animal. It had been domesticated, and it had a master. A human master. And that was the moment the aliens realized they had made a fatal mistake. The moment Brutus fell, a deadly silence filled the air. The Zethra hunters, standing in a tight formation, stared at the giant creature, their cold eyes unblinking. They had completed their mission, and yet something didn't feel right. The alien officer Zorath was the first to speak. "It's done," he said flatly, his voice as cold as the weapons they wielded. Another dangerous beast eliminated. But as the soldiers began to lower their weapons, a sense of unease washed over the group. There was something strange about this kill. Zorath's sharp eyes scanned the creature's body, noticing the unusual collar around its neck. It didn't belong to a wild beast. This wasn't some savage animal. It had been tamed, controlled. Zorath approached cautiously. The collar was sleek, a clear sign of human technology. The alien officer bent down to examine it, pulling a small scanner from his belt. The device hummed as it activated, analyzing the collar's components. The results were shocking. The collar wasn't just a piece of tech, it was a beacon, designed to track the creature and communicate with a human handler. This isn't just a random animal," Zorath muttered to himself. His heart rate quickened. The implications were dire. They hadn't just killed any creature, they had destroyed a human's pet. And humans were not creatures to be underestimated. In the distance, Captain Aaron Blake had barely managed to make it to the clearing before the blast. His feet slipped in the mud as he ran, his voice hoarse from yelling at the soldiers to stop. But it was too late. By the time he reached Brutus, his pet's body was already lifeless, and the cold alien soldiers were standing over him, expressionless. Blake's chest tightened. "What have you done?" he shouted, his words sharp with grief. But the aliens didn't understand. They didn't care. To them, Brutus was just another threat to be neutralized. As Blake cradled Brutus's head, his mind raced. He knew the consequences of what had happened. The Zethra had no idea that they had just provoked the wrath of humanity. What they had killed was not just an animal. It was a symbol of the bond humans shared with their pets. This would not go unpunished. Zorath stared at the human, feeling the weight of his actions. It was then that he realized the full mistake they had made. It was a pet. Zorath said quietly, his voice tinged with something that sounded like regret. Blake's eyes locked with his. "And that's the last mistake you'll ever make." The moment the Zethra soldiers realized their mistake, panic spread like wildfire through their ranks. Zorath, the commander, stood silently, staring at the human soldier cradling his dead pet. His mind raced with the terrifying realization they hadn't just killed an animal. They had killed something far more precious, a human's companion, a pet that was treated like family. This wasn't just a loss for the human, it was a message that could shake the very core of their empire. The alien officer's voice was low, barely a whisper. "We've made a grave error." Behind Zorath, the other soldiers fidgeted nervously, knowing full well that humans were not creatures to be taken lightly. They had heard the stories. Humans, once thought weak and fragile, had proven time and time again that they could fight harder and more fiercely than anyone in the galaxy. And now they had just killed one of their pets. Zorath knew this would not end quietly. "We must report this to the High Command immediately," one of the soldiers suggested, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Zorath turned to face him, his expression hardening. "Do not make the situation worse by acting rashly. We need to stay calm. We must handle this with caution." But no matter how carefully Zorath chose his words, it was clear that the Zethra had made an unforgivable mistake. The death of a human's pet could spark outrage, and the Zethra knew that humans did not take insults lightly. The entire galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. On the other side of the planet, back at the Human Command Center, Blake's commander had already received the devastating news. The humans had their own ways of tracking the Zethra fleet, and as soon as the alien ships had landed on their world, Earth's military had been alerted. Blake's commander wasted no time. The moment he heard about Brutus's death, he understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about sending a message to the galaxy. Blake's commander, General Harrison, was known for his no-nonsense approach to military matters. He had seen many battles, but nothing quite like this. He knew humanity could not afford to let the aliens get away with such a mistake. The Zethra needed to understand the true strength of Earth's military, and Blake's loss would be their lesson. Within hours, a fleet of human warships was prepared for battle. Armed with the latest technology, including advanced cloaking devices and energy weapons, the humans were ready to retaliate. Blake, filled with grief and rage, was among the first to join the mission. He had lost a pet, a friend, but he would not allow that loss to be in vain. He would make sure the Zethra knew the price of their mistake. As the alien fleet prepared to leave the planet, they had no idea what was coming. They thought they had eliminated a threat, but they had no idea that they had just ignited a war. The humans were coming, and they would stop at nothing to ensure that this mistake would not go unpunished. The moment the Zethra fleet lifted off, leaving the planet behind, they had no idea that their actions had set in motion a chain of events they would soon regret. Back at Earth's command center, the mood was heavy with anger and determination. Captain Aaron Blake, still grieving over the loss of Brutus, stood alongside General Harrison. The pain in his eyes was clear, but so was his resolve. He knew what needed to be done. "I won't let them get away with this, General," Blake said, his voice tight with emotion. "Brutus wasn't just a pet. He was my friend. I'll make them pay." Harrison nodded, his expression grim. He understood the human spirit better than anyone. "I know, Blake. But this is bigger than just one life. This is about sending a message. We've faced threats before, but this will be different." The general's words were not just for Blake. They were for every soldier who would fight, every citizen who would support them. The Zethra had crossed a line, and humanity was ready to show them just how powerful they truly were. Across the galaxy, the human fleet was mobilizing. Hundreds of warships, armed with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever created, prepared for battle. The ships were equipped with cloaking technology that allowed them to approach undetected, and energy weapons capable of disintegrating alien ships in a single strike. The humans had learned to fight, to adapt, and to use their ingenuity in ways no other species could match. As the fleet moved into position, Blake stood at the command deck of his ship, his fists clenched. He wasn't just leading this mission for revenge. He was fighting for humanity's honor, for every person who had ever loved a pet, for every soldier who had died protecting Earth. "Target acquired," one of the crew members said, bringing up a holographic image of the alien fleet. It was positioned just beyond a nearby asteroid field, unaware of the approaching human ships. "Prepare for engagement," Blake ordered, his voice steady. "We hit them hard. We hit them fast. No mercy." The human ships slowly advanced, using their cloaking devices to stay hidden. The Zethra fleet, still unaware, cruised through the dark space, their commanders oblivious to the storm that was about to hit them. Suddenly, the silence of space was shattered. The human warships emerged from the shadows, their weapons charging. Without warning, they unleashed a barrage of energy blasts. The first wave hit the Zethra warships with devastating precision. Explosions ripped through the alien fleet as shields buckled under the pressure of the human assault. Ships began to break apart, debris floating in the cold vacuum of space. The Zethra fleet scrambled to retaliate, but the humans were too quick, too strategic. They had studied their enemy, learned their tactics, and were now using their superior technology and relentless determination to strike with unmatched force. Blake's ship led the charge, dodging enemy fire as it launched another round of laser blasts. He could feel the heat from the explosions even in the coldness of space. His heart raced, not from fear, but from the intense desire to bring justice for Brutus. Every explosion, every hit was a step toward avenging his friend. The Zethra commanders were in a state of shock. They hadn't expected this kind of resistance. They had underestimated humanity's resolve. The battle had only just begun, but the tides of war were already turning in humanity's favor. As the Zethra fleet scrambled to regroup, Blake knew that this was just the start. This wasn't just a retaliation for one pet, it was a statement. Humanity would no longer be seen as weak, as easy prey. They had the power to fight back, and they would fight until every alien who had ever dared to underestimate them knew the price of their mistake. The battle had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. The Zethra fleet, once proud and confident, was now in disarray. Humanity's retaliation had come with a ferocity that had taken them completely by surprise. But the humans weren't done yet. Captain Aaron Blake knew that this wasn't just about destroying alien ships. It was about making sure that the Zethra understood the consequences of crossing Earth. The human fleet had already crippled half of the Zethra ships. But there was one last target left, the flagship, the Zygor, which commanded the entire Zethra fleet. It was heavily armored and well protected, but Blake knew that this was where the final blow would be struck. If the Zethra flagship fell, the rest of the fleet would crumble. Blake's ship, the Raven, was in the thick of it, dodging laser blasts from the Zethra warships while closing in on their flagship. He gripped the armrest tightly, eyes fixed on the blinking red lights of the ship's targeting system. His crew moved with precision, each one knowing their role in this final push. "Locking on target," the weapons officer said, his voice calm despite the chaos outside. "We're ready to fire, Captain." Blake nodded, his jaw clenched. This was it. The moment of truth. "Fire!" he ordered, his voice unwavering. The Raven's energy cannons erupted in a brilliant flash of light, sending a massive energy blast straight toward the Zygor. The blast hit with such force that the flagship's shields crackled and failed, allowing the next round of energy to tear into the hull. The Zygor rocked violently, and for a moment, it seemed like the entire ship would break apart. But the Zethra weren't finished yet. From the flagship's main hangar bay, a swarm of fighter ships launched, their engines roaring as they shot toward the Raven. Blake's crew quickly responded, launching countermeasures and returning fire. The sky filled with explosions as the two forces collided in a deadly dance. Blake's heart raced as he watched the battle unfold. He knew that this was more than just a fight for survival. It was a fight for humanity's place in the galaxy. The Zethra had underestimated them, and now humanity was proving that they would not be pushed around. As the Raven and the Zygor exchanged fire, Blake's thoughts drifted back to Brutus. He could almost hear the sounds of his pet's footsteps, the soft growl of affection as Brutus had nuzzled against him. That memory fueled Blake's determination. He wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore. He was fighting for every person who had ever lost something precious, for every human who had ever been told they weren't strong enough. With one final powerful shot, Blake gave the command to fire the last of their torpedoes. The missile raced through space and struck the Zygor directly in its power core. A massive explosion ripped through the flagship, and it began to break apart in a brilliant flash of light. The Zethra fleet, now leaderless and crippled, scattered. The humans had won, but the victory was bittersweet. Blake watched as the remains of the Zygor drifted through space, a silent reminder of the price of underestimating humanity. Blake leaned back in his chair, exhausted but proud. He had avenged Brutus. He had avenged every person who had ever suffered because of the Zethra's cruelty. And most importantly, he had shown the galaxy that humanity would never again be dismissed as weak. They were not just survivors. They were warriors. The Zethra would never forget the lesson they had learned today. Never, ever cross humanity.